12 years old, get out and pound the drums and play the bugles up and down the street all the time.
Thank you. All right. Sven, all yours.
Oh, oops.
I have one question before you start. What Doughboys carry? Did they carry all this stuff? If so, I'm going to go get my horse.
I was going to preface that. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to the Broomfield Veterans Museum. I love coming here. Every time is just a treat. And I'd also thank my long-suffering wife, Susan, for helping me schlep all of this stuff here. And also for Bill for loaning me his Enfield rifle. And Dr. Jeff Hunt and John Steinley for also loaning me some of their equipment as well. I would love to have all of it, but not yet. But to answer Bill's question, the word doughboy has kind of nebulous etymology, and what I've read is that it possibly dates back to the Mexican-American War, where the soldiers serving out here would actually get covered with dust, and they looked as though they were covered in dough. Or it also could be a just kind of a mispronunciation of adobe, again, because it looked as though they were coated in adobe dust. So the reason I brought everything here is because I just wanted to show what was leading up to what the American soldier was carrying in World War I, again, because they were technically doughboys. So during the Civil War, this is the pack that the soldier carried. And this is the model 1855 double bag knapsack with the rubber blanket and the overcoat on top, and also the personal effects and blanket inside. And oftentimes, too, there would be a shelter half. They started issuing those in 1862, and they kept issuing those up until the 1980s. So each man could carry half of a tent and button it together with somebody else. And so because this is what the cartridge belt looked like for the Civil War soldier, carrying, I hope I don't mess up the mic, carrying the paper cartridges and the bayonet and the percussion cap pouch. So it would take 9 steps to load the musket. So tearing open the cartridge, putting the bullet in, rammer, and then using a primer cap on the cone here. And a well-trained soldier could do that 3 times a minute. Or slower if the black powder crust had built up even fast, which oftentimes did happen. And
what was the distance that it was effective range as far as hitting someone on the other side?
About 200-300 yards. And so this is the haversack and the canteen. And oftentimes the soldiers would ditch the pack and they would go to a blanket roll. This will become a recurring theme. So the U.S. Army saw the trend of breech-loading weapons, and rather than get rid of several hundred thousand 1855 and 1861 and 63 Springfield muskets, they converted them to breech firing. And this is an original Allen conversion. What they did is they put a 50 caliber barrel, brazed it inside, and they put this trap door on here. So up until the early 1870s, these were 50 caliber. And they still kept the leather accoutrements minus the cap pouch. So it was now loading, all you had to do was pull out a metallic cartridge, put it in, bang, and then go to half cock, and now your rate of fire has tripled. And it was a nasty shock at a battle called Wagon Box, where the Indians attacking a wood party were suddenly found themselves being mown down because they were used to seeing the white man using a ramrod and everything else. Suddenly they were just getting a terrific volume of fire. And this is the 1873 Springfield, same action, but now it's 4570. And this is a cadet model, shortened, is meant for drill. But this is what the Colorado Volunteers carried in the Philippines in 1898-99. Yes?
Playing 45-70.
45 caliber and 70 grains of powder. So your volunteer units were still carrying these. And in the 1880s, a Frenchman developed smokeless powder, which was a very big advantage because now you could see what you were firing at after you started firing, as opposed to firing a volley with Civil War muskets.
Speaking of the Civil War, were the Confederates using the same rifle?
Yes. Yes, they were. Am I still broadcasting? Okay. And since the Army was using brass bullets and carrying them still in leather cartridge belts or leather cartridge boxes, they were finding that the tanning chemicals in the leather was creating that green verdigris, that buildup on the shell casings. So a fellow by the name of Mills, who was a colonel, who retired as a colonel in the Army, he came up with weaving belts, cartridge belts like this. And this is what the soldiers wore in the Spanish-American War. And after that was over, the British or the Commonwealth forces started taking an interest. So he was able to retire a very wealthy man. So this, hooked on like so. The socket bayonet has not gone away yet. Many of these were converted Civil War bayonets. The socket was just cold pressed down to fit the smaller muzzle. And also during this time period, the Army was becoming more and more conscious of soldiers being able to treat their own wounds on the battlefield. And I don't have a mock-up with me, but the first aid kit started being issued during the Spanish-American War. It was a paper bundle, probably a little bit bigger than a bar of soap, that had a triangular bandage and some sterilized gauze in it. The problem was, in the field or in combat, that tended to get damaged and it wasn't sterile anymore. So then the Army started issuing little tins for the first aid kits to hook onto the belts, and those would snag on vegetation. And then they started issuing pouches for those. And so those have come in many different shapes and sizes, and now today, of course, the first aid kit is a much bigger bundle, and there's much more to them.
What was the Army's thinking when they converted from the leather bayonet scabbard to the metal one?
You know, I haven't read any. They just it's just blued steel, but I don't know if it was just more durable. But that's a good question.
I've noticed over the years that the leather one actually seems to be more practical, because when you take the bayonet out, it's a little bit pliable. So when you lay down or fall down or something, it gives a little bit. Those you can, they kind of either come up and jab you or you bend them.
Right.
So I always kind of wondered why they went away from the leather one.
Who was the contractor?
For?
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
The leather or the metal, I just.
A bunch of them, I'm sure.
I just.
So. So what the regular Army was using was a Danish design. This is the Krag Jorgensen rifle. And some of the doughboys that when they first went over to Europe were still carrying these. just so they would have something to march and drill with before they were issued a more modern arm. And this is a bolt-action weapon, and it feeds from the side. This is 30 caliber, and so you feed the cartridges in from the side and snap it shut, and it has a magazine lock, so you can just fire single shots, so you still have those 4 bullets in reserve. The Springfield, the 03 Springfield has the same feature. So this is what the regulars were carrying during the Spanish-American War, and then we found out that the Mausers that the Spanish were using were actually a better weapon. And so the Army adopted the 03 Springfield, inspired by the Mauser. And the nice thing about this is you notice it's shorter. Up until this time, you would have a cavalry length carbine, or you'd have a longer infantry weapon. This served both purposes. But the Germans said, hey, wait a minute. This uses a stripper clip to load. It looks very similar. You owe us royalties. We were paying the Germans royalties on the Springfields until we went to war in 1917.
That'll teach you to start a war with us. We won't pay.
And
Better watch out.
Watch out for those lawyers.
And also, too, the haversack had changed, had gone from tarred black to canvas. But they were still holding on to the canteen on the strap. And, of course, the bedroll. The Army did experiment with different types of packs. Generally, the troops hated them, and they would just discard them and just wrap up whatever they needed up into either their gum blanket or their shelter half, and just sling it over their shoulder. So now the Army has a clip-fed weapon, so they need to start developing cartridge belts with the pockets on them to hold the clips. And so this is, and I can see why these suspenders did not last long in service, because they are always a hassle to deal with, even when they stay attached. But this is an earlier, oh, thank you, Bill. This is an earlier cartridge belt. And so you still have the haversack, and now this canteen, the strap has gone away, and it has this handy little yoke on the cartridge belt that you hang the canteen from, just like so. And so this was used in the early 20th century, and also you start seeing the entrenching tools, because up until the early 20th century, you either had to use your bayonet, and the Army did experiment with a trowel-shaped bayonet for the trapdoor Springfield. So it was the blade was probably about that long and about that wide, and it generally wasn't good for either service, digging or stabbing. So it didn't last very long.
You see them on eBay all the time, and they don't sell very well.
Sell it to third world countries.
Consequently, they did make a bolo knife bayonet for the Krag rifle, which was handy for clearing vegetation in the when they were carrying them in the Philippines. Now, this is a model 1905 shovel. This is the first pattern, and these are very difficult to find because they would break. There's no back strap here. So they would tend to just snap when they were in service. I was very lucky. I found this at an antique store. They didn't know what they had. I found it for $12. This thing's probably at least worth $100, $150. So they started making the carriers for these so that this would hang on your belt. And again, you had your bedroll. And also by this time, the fellas in the field who were the medical personnel, they started wearing brassards like this. And this one made myself. And so rather than an improvised tarred haversack like they would, some men used during the Civil War for carrying bandages or maybe a bullet probe, something like that, they started issuing these hospital core pouches. And they were somewhat standardized. I have in here, I do have a period triangular bandage with little diagrams on it showing you how to use it. And other things in here, foot powder. There was official 4 dressings were supposed to go in this. Ammonia, this is supposed to come with a little metal cup so that you could pour that in the cup and put it under the patient's nose to revive them because the little ammonia inhalers weren't out yet.
That urine works the same.
Yeah, and you know, it's probably even stronger. I speak from experience, or maybe you do too. And
Carry a cat with you.
yeah, that's right.
Well, there's a pouch for the cat.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the pouch, comma cat. 1907, one each. Yeah. A wire mesh splint, and this is actual World War I issue splint here, and adhesive tape. This is an original roll, and you'd also have some gauze in here as well. And so this bag was carried from the 1880s up until the early 20th century. In fact, you see soldiers who were serving in the punitive expedition wearing these. And the Army also started issuing the sanitary soldiers, is what they were called at the time. They started issuing them knives, such as this. This is an early 20th century hospital core knife for clearing brush and for also, say, chopping up wood to use as splints or whatever you need a large utility knife for. And it was given a rounded point just to show that it was not meant as a weapon, but it was meant as a tool. And I will, actually I'll pass this around. This is, going forward in time a little bit, this is a World War I first aid kit. And originally they came with 2 dressings. So one is still all folded up, the other one I spread out, and it has a set of instructions and a couple of little pins. My understanding is that they were still thinking of an entrance and an exit wound if somebody got hit with a full metal jacket bullet. Combat experience showed that it was much better to have one large dressing. And that's when in the 1920s, the Carlisle bandage came out, which a lot of GIs used during World War II. And I also have here a package of sublimated gauze from Johnson & Johnson. Sublimated meaning that it was sterilized using a mercury vapor. So I'll pass that around so you can get a closer look at it. And so also during this time period, the Army was using all manner of different leggings. So these are model 1885 leggings. These were worn during the Spanish-American War. These, there was actually, I saw some of the Doughboys wearing these. These are model 1910 leggings. There was another type, the 08s. They were a little bit different. These are model 1917 leggings. These are original. So for some reason, they had to keep changing them. And
Nobody liked any of them.
you know,
What was the purpose for the leggings?
well, the nice thing about the leggings is that you don't have the Army didn't have to make taller boots, so they saved on leather. But with the leggings, then you keep stuff from going inside your boot. Now, the only time you see leggings in the Civil War is if you had like a specialized unit. But by and large, leggings were not issued to regular troops.
The puttees that you have on, are those early or late war?
These are what the soldiers were transitioned into once they got overseas. When you see a picture, there was a picture of some doughboys talking to who looked like a Frenchman. They were still wearing their canvas leggings, so they were probably still in training, and they probably hadn't gone into service yet. Everybody, Axis or Entente and Central Powers, adopted the wool puttees. They were just easier to put on and take off in the trenches. And America was very ill prepared to get into the war, not just for training, but also for equipment. The boots that I'm wearing, these are reproductions of French boots, because the American issue boots just weren't up to the task of being in the trenches. Yes?
That last set of leggings that you showed in the 1960s, and probably after the Navy was using those in basic training, and everybody had to use them, had to put them on every single day, and had to learn how to fold your uniform, which were bell bottoms. It's a pain in the neck. And
Oh yeah, I can believe it.
put them on. So I think they're still using leggings, but I'm not sure. And I have a neighbor who his kid just went into the Navy basic training. So when he gets back, I'll ask him if they
They are sharp looking, but yeah, when your fingers are stiff and cold first thing in the morning trying to put, lace them up, yeah, they're a hassle.
Right. The one nice thing about the leggings, those canvas ones, if you've ever walked through a field with like dried stuff, you get all those burrs and stuff that stick to your socks. And when you put your leggings on, that eliminates that, so that later on you don't find that your socks are scratching you, because all those little things that stuck to them get on there. So they do have a decent use, but they are paid to put on.
And now up until the late 19th century, there was not a standardized eating utensils for the soldiers. Now this is a World War I, what we call a mess kit. In Army parlance, it was a meat can. And they started issuing these in the late 1880s, I believe, but they were of japanned tin, so they were more of a grayish black color. And they also came with a knife, fork, and spoon, unlike the soldiers during the Civil War, where they basically had to come up with their own eating utensils. Let's see. And so now we've gotten into the, we've gone over there. And so and I will show, this is another not used very often. This is the model 1878 blanket bag. This one was probably made in the early 20th century. Had provisions for putting your shelter half on top, and then you hang your big Army mug on the bottom like so. And you'd think this would be a very practical item, but either they weren't popular or just not enough of them were made. You do see some troops in the Philippines wearing these, but generally it's the blanket roll again. And incidentally, I found this bag at a thrift store in Arvada for $5. It pays to thrift. Something else around this time, and some of you may know from, say, the Battle of Cold Harbor. Many Union soldiers knew they were walking into a meat grinder and wanted to make sure people knew who they were, because they figured, I'm going to be dead. I don't want to be just unknown. And they would write their name inside their uniform or on a piece of paper or whatever, or they had already had a coin smoothed down and engraved with their name. Early 20th century, the Army finally starts to issue identification discs. And these are all hand stamped. And they're very simple. It just has the fellow's name, Lutman. He was a private and he's USA. And he was a machine gunner in the 89th Division, and he was wounded in the summer of 1918. I have his notebook here as well. So now, this is the Model 1910 pack, which I'm sure you saw in the video. This had been adopted. And there was a few different variations on it, color, the way it fit together. But this carries all of your personal equipment and your shelter half and blanket, or maybe 2 blankets, and your meat can right here, and your bayonet here. And I've got my cartridge belt, and now we've gone over to the model 1910 canteen. And the first ones of these were made from spun aluminum. They were seamless, but those didn't last very long. I'm sure they were very labor intensive. And they came with a canteen cup inside, which I just love canteen cups because they hold a lot of coffee, or they also hold a lot of Cheerios. And here is the ubiquitous first aid kit pouch. And so, since we were so, oh, and also the Army, and actually I have an original without the cartridge belt, 1910 pack. I picked this up, just the pack. Susan was with me in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a surplus store. And that was what I paid for it, $3.95. It was just in and amongst a bunch of other World War II ones, and I couldn't believe it. And
You're killing me here, Sven.
and now, this would be the type of pouch that an NCO would carry, because instead of an entrenching tool, there's this little pouch here for carrying extra incidentals, say a foot powder or a sewing kit, anything else that his squad might need.
Like a cat.
Like a cat, yeah, a kitten, yeah. And you just squeeze it, yeah. And so I'll pass that around. And you can see this got a lot of use. It's been reworked at a sewing machine several times.
The nice thing about the foot powder is if you don't like your rations, you sprinkle a little bit on there. It actually makes them taste a little better.
I'll take your word for that, Bill.
After you've used the foot powder.
Now, the Army Medical Corps thought, well, you know what? We need to standardize all of our equipment that we're treating the soldiers with, and they just need more dressings rather than just 4 in a bag. So they came up with this hospital corps belt. And so it looks sort of like a large cartridge belt. So in the first few pockets you have the ammonia, and you've got your medical tape and gauze and safety pins and iodine, and the rest of the pockets in back each has 2 dressings. And they were wrapped in a heavy waterproofed paper. And one of the criticisms of that is that they would stick together, so it was difficult to try and pull one out at a time. But they did have some, we're thinking ahead. This is a model 1912 cavalry ration bag. And the thing about it is that you can take it apart and drape it on either side of your saddle, or you can lace it together and make a backpack out of it. And so they adopted this so it wouldn't hang over your bandages when you were trying to treat a patient.
How did you discover all that information about all these different...
What happened was, especially after Sandy Hook, when I was still doing school presentations more regularly, schools were more leery about my even bringing in dummy weapons. So I thought, okay. So I started putting together medical kits and doing research on those. And I was so lucky to find that first aid kit I passed around, because I didn't know what was in them. Because all you see online are unopened ones for $100, $150, and I wasn't going to buy one of those and rip it open. But I found that one half open for $35. Now, the hatchet has replaced the hospital corps knife. I'm assuming probably because it's maybe more practical and also easier to replace if lost. And I have a tag booklet here with carbon paper. So as I treat patients, I can write down their name, where they were wounded, etc., rip off the tag and attach it to one of their buttons, and then have them move on. So that's when you first start seeing these. It's just right around the beginning of the First World War.
We started later writing that stuff right on their forehead. And stayed with them.
And I have my own first aid kit. So if you were hit, the sanitary soldier would come up and use your first aid kit first. Now, this is a reproduction Bauer and Black first aid kit tin. And instead of the little tab like the World War II ones, this has a little ring that you would pull to open it up and get your dressings out.
Not a very big dressing.
No, it's amazing how compacted they are. I mean, once you open it up, you can't get it back in. And there was an officer's belt, which is something I would like to acquire. That had fewer pouches on it, but it had it did have provision for a tag booklet, syringe, and also a little alcohol burner to sterilize the syringe, and also a minor surgery kit. And now this is an apothecary roll, which has much of that same equipment in there. And it has little belt loops on it, but I could not find out whether it was common for officers to wear one of these. So.
We're talking about medical officers.
Yes. And so, no Velcro here. And, okay, this went much smoother in rehearsal. There we go. So, now, I made most of these out of 3/4 inch doweling. So you'd have these little Bakelite or hard rubber pill bottles here. So you'd have some stuff like, let's see, Mistura glycinerase, I forgot what that's for. Quinine sulfus, pilulae catharticae compositae. And doing a little bit of research on this, it was like reading something out of the 19th century. But you also carried a syringe kit in here, which I don't have. Cotton balls, and also, courtesy of Bill here a few years ago, a minor surgery kit. So, and I have in here forceps and scalpels, and that you have to sharpen yourself. So you'd know you were in good hands when the officer's scalpel and his needles were sharp, and also actual period ligature with the needle attached.
How would you sharpen?
A stone. You actually have a sharpening stone. That was something you would learn in the training, was how to do that. And
in the Civil War, before they understood germ warfare, the guys used to use their boots to hone their things, and then they would start cutting on you, so you wondered why there were so many deaths.
So, now, so what the soldiers would look like, say during the punitive expedition, got the campaign hat. They would have to find their own goggles, because it's dusty down there, Texas, New Mexico, and your own kerchief as well, to keep the dust out of your face. And
your uniform was still wool?
Your uniform was still wool. There was a cotton version of this, but you rarely see that issued. It was usually the full wool. And
there's a khaki, kind of a duck khaki cloth, and it's really much more comfortable.
Let's see. So we get over to Europe and we're training. They swap out the leggings for the puttees. They're issued better boots. And by this time, the Army has been talking to Springfield saying, hey, yeah, we're going to raise this large army. And Springfield says, that's awesome. What are you going to arm them with? Because the 03 Springfield was practically handmade, and that was only one factory. So fortuitously, we were licensed building the pattern 14 rifle for the British. But then the war started. They realized, well, they can't switch gears. So the government asked Winchester and Eddystone, if they could make these. So this is the Enfield rifle, and about 70% of your Doughboys were carrying these and not the Springfield. And many soldiers weren't really happy about that. First of all, you can see that it's a bit longer. And now, I didn't find the action too bad on this, firing one of these. But again, you have the long bayonet. And this was another thing that was switched over when the Doughboys went overseas. Rather than wear a campaign hat like that would get all crunched on troop trains and stuff like that, we adopted what the French were already wearing, gendarme type of cap. And there's a few different styles of these that you see soldiers wearing during World War I. One of the complaints that the European advisors had when they came over here was that the U.S. soldiers seemed to be spending too much time on bayonet drill and signal flags, which in the trenches you're just basically saying, "Here, shoot me." But there was still that idea of going over the top and giving them the cold steel, and you actually see there was a mount for these on the, I believe it was the model 1897 shotgun, could carry an Enfield bayonet. And you see troops carrying these in Vietnam sometimes with plastic handles on the shotguns.
But that's not removable, that end bayonet.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it is. So they didn't have to carry it always like that?
No, it would be on their pack. No.
Okay.
There we go. And the other thing that we adopted from the British, after 1915, all the combatants in France realized, yeah, we need some sort of head protection. Soft caps and those leather pickle halbas just aren't cutting it. So the British adopted what's called the Brodie-style helmet. And so we adopted it. Now you can tell the difference. The British, there was a canvas, a cloth strap with a little bit of a rubber in there, so you can just strap it on, pull it, and then pull it under your chin. The American ones have a leather strap and a slightly different suspension as well. And oftentimes you see the British helmets with burlap over them. And you don't usually see American helmets with any sort of a covering in the trenches during World War I. But yeah, this is an original. And since I don't do Marine, there was a Marine emblem on the front. Because I thought, oh, if I wear this, then I have to accessorize and get everything else. Little did I know that when the Marines went into battle, when their uniforms wore out, they were more of a pine green color, they were issued from Army stocks. Of course, they weren't really crazy about that. And oftentimes they would take their own buttons and put them on the Army uniforms, just so they could still be identified as Marines. Of course, the other thing that we had to take a crash course in was gas warfare. Now, this is a reproduction of the British small box respirator. And so when you're not on alert, you can wear it like so. But when you're in the front lines, you have to wear it either with the strap shortened or taking this twine here and passing it through the strap in the back and then tying it in front so it doesn't flop around. And so putting this on, and I don't know, this is something I haven't been able to find out. I know they did this in World War II. If you wore glasses, they would accommodate you with the gas mask so that it would fit over your glasses. I'm not sure if they did that in World War I. Now, you had to shave, so you could get as tight a seal as possible here, but still, this is not airtight. So you have to pinch open the nose clamps, and then when you put this on, bite down on the little mouthpiece here and breathe through the filter. And the filter was filled with charcoal made from various nut shells and would absorb the gas. And that was actually very effective in doing that. And the Germans first started using chlorine gas in 1915. Then they moved to phosgene, and then they moved to mustard gas. And mustard gas was especially nasty because it would make even nastier blisters when there was moisture. So now you're wearing a damp uniform, you're sweating, and very quickly the aid men had to learn, well, I can't grab a gas casualty with my bare hands. So again, the French came to our aid and taught us about that, or provided some manner of gloves for aid men to grab casualties and not get blisters on their hands, to put them on a stretcher. And by this time, you had very well-trained stretcher crews. This is an original stretcher. You can, afterwards, you can come up and feel how heavy it is. And so it's much better to wound your enemy than kill him, because then you've got to take more guys out of the line in order to carry this guy to the rear. And the other thing you had to watch out for, you had to make sure you had your anti-dimming compound to rub on the lenses so that they wouldn't fog up. Because oftentimes you would have to wear this for 2 or 3 hours straight.
Where did you get that?
This, there is a wonderful online sutler. It's What Price Glory. And I think this was 200 something, or 170 something. But it's a very nice replica. And the next time you watch an Indiana Jones movie, take a look at his satchel. It's one of these. But it's actually the British version. Yes?
How long would the charcoal last?
I think it was probably about in the matter of maybe 5 hours max, something like that.
And were there replacement charcoal would you put in?
You know, I'm not, if you were in the field, I'm not sure. I guess you would probably have to just get out of there. This would also come with a little notebook inside showing the maintenance on, and also there would be a roll of tape in here too to repair any rips in the actual mask. Now, oftentimes, the Doughboys would be issued a backup mask. This is a French M2, and despite my best efforts, I could not find out what these are, what the cloth was treated with to neutralize the gas. Oh, that's right, I forgot. Yeah, just squeeze in. And
The magic elixir.
so again, it just slips on very quickly like so. And you can wear this in an area that's been saturated with gas. Also, if you have a patient and you're taking him through an area where it's been gassed, this is much better to put on a patient, on an unconscious patient on a stretcher, rather than try to get one of these on him, because you can't, fit it in his mouth or anything else like that. This I got from What Price Glory as well.
They also made them for horses. If you ever go to the World War I Museum in Kansas City, they've got one on a horse. And when I first saw that, I thought,
thank you.
A horse to wear that thing.
Have you been able to since then?
I never had one. I'm pretty sure my horse wouldn't have any of
Give
it.
him a whiff of cat urine.
So now, this is a, I didn't want to take a chance on scratching up the museum's Springfield rifle. This is a Paris Dunn training rifle from World War II. Looks very much like a Springfield. But again, just to show you, the stripper clip that was perfected by the Mauser company. We just slap that in and push down the cartridges, and the little stripper just falls away, and you're ready to go. Something else we had to learn from the British and the French in terms of offensive capabilities is using grenades. Now, this is a replica of a British Mills bomb. It's a rubber replica, but it works very similar to an American grenade. Hold down the operating lever, pull the pin, and when you release it, the striker snaps down, and then the fuse starts to burn. It's about a 4 to 5 second fuse. And now if you wanted to reach out and hit somebody, longer than your arm could throw. The British started using rod grenades. So to take a Mills bomb, and they had a long rod, the same caliber as the rifle, and would put it down the barrel and fire them that way. And of course, you could regulate the range by how far you put it down the barrel. Problem was, that tended to ruin the rifle. That rod would mess up the rifling in the barrel. So the British developed a cup launcher, and in the little short video that we saw, they didn't show it fully, but and this is a mock-up I made, there was a Frenchman instructing a doughboy on how to use a Vivien Bessière grenade launcher. And it would just clip over the end of the weapon like so, and more often than not, you had to use some sort of metal shims to keep it on the end of the weapon and just to keep it straight. And this is a mock-up of the grenade. You used a live round. There was a hole going all the way through the grenade. So as the bullet passed through, it would set off the fuse, and then the explosive gas behind it would launch it out of the cup. And it sounds really sketchy, but
holding that thing way out there like that.
The U.S. Marines were still, we adopted it, the U.S. Marines were still using the VB, the Vivien Bessière launchers, early in the Pacific War. The way they attached was slightly different, but it was generally the same system. And in fact, this is, you may have come across these in catalogs. This is a grenade vest. This one is dated April of 1918. Hardly any of these ever reached Europe before hostilities ended. And that's why this is an original. It's in such beautiful shape. But this was meant to carry rifle grenades. And you could wear it either like so or off to the side and have ready access to all your rifle grenades.
All right, kill me. How much did you give for that?
I don't remember. We got it in the, if you remember the, what was it, the Heritage Square. Heritage Square, when they closed down, they were selling off all their costumes and props. This was among all this, so I paid a song for it.
I have a list of things. Would you go shopping for me?
Get in line behind me.
And you start to, patches start coming out toward the end of the war. You usually don't see patches on uniforms until after the war. But this is a First Army medical patch here. And I'll pass that around so you can take a good look at it. And Bill, I don't remember where I got this. So now,
You talk about patches. They actually started in the Civil War.
the core patches.
Yeah, the core patches. They to give the guys some identity, but then they kind of went away from it for a while.
Now, to finish off and to just basically show our reluctance of getting involved on the world stage in 1918, 1919, 1920, I brought along a Russian Mosin Nagant rifle. Now, from 1918 to 1920, we were involved in the Russian Civil War. There were troops from, I believe it was Minnesota, in Archangel, and then we also had troops in Siberia alongside the Japanese and the British. And in Archangel, we were alongside the French, British, and Canadians. They provided most of the cold weather gear there because it's above the Arctic Circle and it's just bitter. And American soldiers were issued, now this is a World War II version, it's a little bit shorter, but they were issued Mosin Nagants. They weren't happy about that, but it was easier to get ammunition for these than it was for an Enfield or a Springfield. But it's a bolt action, 5-round stripper clip, and I find it's very pleasant to shoot. And these first started being used by the Tsar's armies in the 1890s. And you still see them turning up around the world somewhere. You still saw them being used by the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s.
What's the caliber of it?
This is 7.62 54R, so it's a pretty big round. And these are blanks, which are next to impossible to find now. So that is at least some of what the Doughboy carried. And if there are any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is there any kind of catalog that tells you all of the pieces of equipment, or do you have to research, in backpacks, medical kits?
Yeah, for me, it's been kind of been a bit piecemeal, but I don't know where my other books went. There's a publisher called Osprey, and they make some really excellent books that are similar to this. And this one is from Stackpole Books. So this covers from Civil War to the end of World War II. And so, for instance, I learned when the points on the chevrons went up. That was 1902. Little useless bit of trivia there. And in the 1870s, the uniform changed. So you had like your Civil War soldier upstairs. That's what the American soldier looked like up until 1872. Then they began to go over the wool trousers were a little bit darker, and the sack coat became more tailored. And so trying to put that together is just more money, and I haven't gotten around to doing that yet. Let's see. Did you have a question? Okay. Yes.
When did the term dog tags come about, and why did?
That's a good question. I'm not sure when identity discs dropped out. I mean, obviously by World War II they were calling them dog tags.
They called the soldiers dog faces.
Dog face soldier.
So dog tags.
But
That's how it came about, the dog tags.
but that's a good question. I am not sure when it became dog tag. Yes.
How long have you been doing this? I mean, how long? I mean, we're looking at a collection of I don't know how many years.
I've been doing it since 1995.
I saw a picture of him as a baby, and he was
And I almost forgot. I'll pass this around. Now, this is an actual World War I Montana peak hat. The best time to go to thrift stores, you might want to cover your ears, Bill. Best time to go to thrift stores is during Halloween. I found this for $4 at the Ark in Green Mountain. So yeah, it has the original Grow Grain band on it, and you can see the fella just used a shoelace to tie it to keep it on his head, so you can get a feel for that.
Amazing.
Funny enough, during the Civil War, they never issued what they called any kind of a strap to the cavalry to hold your hat on. And you would think that the U.S. Army would be a little smarter than that, because when your horse starts running, there's a pretty good chance your hat's going to blow off. But the guys would do just what he did, put a shoelace or a piece of leather or something. But the Army didn't issue any, what they eventually became called stampede straps.
And now, since you need something, this is before the advent of the folding shovel. This is the Pickmatic, and these came out the same time as the entrenching tool. So this is what you would use to break up the ground, and usually one man in a squad, or maybe a couple guys in a machine gun crew would have one of these to help break up the ground so that you could actually shovel it. And it just breaks back down like so. And it is amazing. This is an actual World War I carrier for this. It's dated 1918. I got it for like $20 online. Some of this stuff is still hanging around. Pershing was really hoping that the British and the French would, or he was figuring that they would probably peter out because they had been in fighting for so long, and that he was figuring that America by 1919 would be the biggest army in the field. And so factories were gearing up and making all manner of equipment, and then suddenly the war ended. So there's a lot of this stuff that just got surplused because it wasn't needed, because as soon as the war is over with, well, what do guys want to do? They want to go home. They don't want to, be soldiers anymore.
Could you do one thing for me?
Huh.
Could you put all this stuff on so that we could do that?
All at once?
I want to take a picture.
After I take off the microphone.
Can I mention something? Who constructed this, you know, the machines that did the stitching, they had to have a special machine to have these 5 rows of, you know, to make it exactly like this.
And that's an enlisted men's hat.
Yes, it's very nice.
And what was this that you brought in, Bill?
Like an officer's hat. Yeah, Pershing was wearing one in that picture.
Yeah.
That would be something you would wear
Right.
with like
Put it
this.
on.
More,
I don't know if is it big
real
enough?
small.
Yeah.
When I found
Oh,
it,
just a
I
little bit.
Let's see, it's a 7, but yeah, it's
Do you have a tool to make your head smaller?
Cat, you're a cat.
I was just trying to think of anything else I forgot.
That was shriveled. Do you have a favorite item that you were so happy you found?
Like the World War I WD-40.
Let's see here, favorite item.
His wife says anything that's green.
Probably one of them would be putting this together, because it was a lot of work. Now these packs, I had to cobble together the straps. Normally these packs, when they're complete with all the straps, run you about maybe $200 or so, depending on the shape they're in. This is a reproduction hospital core belt. I think I paid $35 for this. Actually, what was interesting, the fellow who made this, he sent it to me first before I even paid him. And so yeah, putting this together. One thing that's exceedingly difficult to find, now since these pockets are so big, wearing the canteen, you need this little extender here. Well, original extenders, it's just a little hunk of webbing with one of those hooks on it. Run you $100 easy if you can find them. And every now and again, you'll see somebody who will make reproductions of these. But before that happened, I just found some webbing and I made my own. But yeah, you can see just how you would not be able to attach the canteen and have this pouch be full. One thing that medics did like to get a hold of, and it's something I passed on, was the French bidon, which was a 2-liter canteen. And they have 2 spouts. I think one's like an air release valve and the other one is to drink out of. And that carries 2 liters of water. And they're usually covered in blue corduroy, which has a lacing on it. And those are very hard to find.
No,
and
that was so that 2 Frenchmen could drink out of it at the same time.
oh, okay. Thanks, Bill.
You know how the French are.
If you find any doughboy that can run a 100-yard dash in 20 seconds
Yeah.
with equipment on there.
In the mud.
Have you visited the World War I Museum?
I have not yet. I've driven by it.
You must have marvelous.
Are you talking about the one in Kansas City?
Yes.
We should go there sometime.
I know,
It's
it's-
really cool.
This was something I picked up too that I had to open. Since I was talking about the first aid kit, it was 2 dressings. This is a training kit. So it has 2 oversized dressings so that you can learn how to put them on in a classroom. And unlike the World War II dressings, which is stamped in red ink, put other side toward wound, this has blue paper on there so that you know, okay, so this side goes on the wound. And you could actually open up the gauze and spread it out. And then, once you're done, after using practicing on a few students, you can wash it. And then just put it back in the little box. And I think they were still using something like that during World War II as well.
Well, side note, I spent 26 years on the fire department. In the early days, we didn't have a lot of good blood stoppers. But the one thing that we found that worked really good when somebody was really gushing was women's sanitary pads. You know, the old Kotex. You could stick one of those things on there and wrap it, and they did a great job. So, you know, everybody always made fun of us because, you know, a bunch of firemen are carrying Kotex around.
Do you remember Dave Pollock?
Yeah.
He talked about the same thing in Desert Storm.
Blood stop.
There is something called blood stop, and you can get blood stop.
Makes
I'm
it
not sure.
coagulate, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and 1360khnc.com is one of the websites that you can find that at. Every household can have it.
And since this is the tunic that the Doughboys wore. Usually you see the fellas in the punitive expedition, they're just wearing the pullover shirt. And also, there was a couple shots in that video of some of the Doughboys wearing, I think like 1911, model 1911 roll neck sweaters. What Price Glory has those too. It's something that's been on my list.
Did they wear suspenders at all?
They did not. That's a good question. Since the Civil War soldiers, Spanish-American War soldiers, very conspicuous for wearing suspenders. Army regulations at this time, no suspenders. So they give you this little anemic waist belt here. And I even had these taken in, and there's these, I'm still kind of swimming in these. A lot of times in a parade, I sewed buttons on here, and I wear some suspenders, just so it's easier to march and go to right, left shoulder and stuff during a parade. And interestingly enough, the Army held on to the puttees well into the 1930s. And you see a mixed bag of soldiers stateside, either wearing leggings or wearing these puttees in training maneuvers in the 20s and in the 30s as well.
National Guard.
Yep. And so
So is there
these,
some rank insignia on your uniform?
here? Are you talking about the discs or where?
Like showing, are you a sergeant or?
Actually, yeah, I'm a private here. The discs, and I'll get to the chevrons in just a sec. The discs, this crossed rifles for infantry, and then U.S. for regular Army. You also had discs for the National Army. There's discs for medical and engineer and whatever function you had. They also started doing patches denoting whatever your specialty was. They were very short on chevrons, so they only had them on the right side. And I was going to put my sergeant stripes back on here just to talk about that. So whenever you see a World War I NCO, most often he just has his stripes just on the right sleeve.
I've seen some stuff on eBay. It looks like the privates didn't actually have stripes. They had sort of a round disc that, you know,
yeah, there was a patch. There was a patch for that. And I have some of those at home, but again, I was just thinking, I've already brought a bunch of stuff.
So when did you go to a strike? Corporal?
Yes.
So you had to be at least a corporal.
That's my understanding, yep. Yes?
You may know that this is the Mamie Eisenhower Library, the first one we had here, and there are a lot of pictures of Ike around. And I think they were married in 1960. You may see some pictures of Ike around in the...
And poor Ike thought his career was over because he didn't engage in the fighting.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, but he was just such a good organizer.
And he was stationed at Fort Logan also for a few months.
And I found online some really great pictures of Colorado volunteers with the campaign hats on, with the bedrolls, and the cartridge belts with the suspenders, getting on a train, at Fort Logan.
We should add that to our collection.
We just add Sven to our collection. Mount him on the wall.
And I've known Flint since I first started doing this.
One of those plastic boxes where you go up and push the button and you turn them on.
Yeah, there you go.
Drop a quarter.
Yeah, good idea.
Well, Sven, thank you so
Oh,
much.
my pleasure. Ooh, wow, thank you. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, please come up and look
Yes,
at
please.
the collection here.
Sven, have you had a chance to see our World War I exhibit?
I did.
The new
Yeah, because
2 weeks ago.
I have not. I'll go up.
oh, there's in addition to what was already there. Oh no, I didn't yet. Oh, cool. Oh, I will.
Would you